Hey, we've got a brew. We're going to chat shit about e-bikes. Stay tuned. Hey guys, Will from Tobys Thoughts Suspension here. We're here at Cannock today to do a bit of e-bike testing. We've got the Yeti 160E and the MONDRAKER Neat RR. Two different systems. You've got the full fat system of the Shimano EP801 motor. Then you've got the TQ system on the MONDRAKER. So we're just looking to do a couple of monkey trails. It's about 16 to 1800 feet of climbing. Good varied terrain. So we're going to test both platforms, give you some feedback on the handling, and also obviously the range and what you can expect from both bikes. Hope you like it. Okay guys, we're back from our e-bike test at Cannock. Really excited to show you what we found. We're trying to dispel the myth really between the range on the lightweight e-bikes and how they compare to a full fat bike. Maybe Toby, you can give us some background on both those systems.
Yeah, so basically the TQ system is a relatively new system that's derived for coming into the lightweight e-bike market. It has a very small 50 Newton meter max torque motor with a internal 360 watt-hour battery with the added extra range extender battery of 160 watt-hours. Both batteries are removable, so you can take both batteries out and you can have basically a very light pedalable mountain bike. TQ have tried to make as little resistance and a very, very quiet organic motor for their system to make it feel as much like a mountain bike as possible. The Yeti is on the EP801 system, so that's got a 630 watt-hour battery, 600 watts of power and 85 Newton meters of torque, as opposed to the Neat being 300 watts of power and only a 50 Newton meter amount of torque.
So what are we looking at weight-wise between the two bikes?
So basically the Neat comes in at the RR model that we haven't been testing at 18.3 kilos with the main battery in the down tube. The range extender is an extra about 950 grams. The Yeti being 23.5 kilos, both bikes in large. So it's around about 4.5 to 5 kilos heavier between the two bikes. But each bike has a very different characteristics. So the way the bikes ride is not just weight derived, it's characteristics of the way the bikes have been made and geometry and fit and everything like that. So we'll talk through that as the video progresses.
Yeah, and obviously the main aim to the test was to compare and contrast the two bikes and obviously see how much range we could really get out of the Neat, and we found that to be really interesting. So where we tried both bikes was at Cannock. Our main plan was to do 2 loops of the monkey trail. It worked out about 20 miles-ish, more or less, with about 2,600 feet of climbing. So really we wanted to put both bikes through that kind of pace, that kind of climbing, those kind of trail conditions to see where each of them excelled and what we could actually get out of them. Turned out to be a really good day. The weather was a bit wet. It's obviously winter. We're in February now. So if you're going to put stresses and strains on an e-bike, now's a good time. So you can really get to the bottom of what they can do.
Yeah, and to like add to that, it also highlights when you put elevation into trail, when you're lacking on power on the lightweight e-bike against the full fat e-bike, how we could compare these two platforms to put ourselves into a position as though there would be a split group of riders, half on full fat e-bikes and half on lightweight e-bikes, where those gains would be made and lost, certainly with elevation, and knowing how much extra effort you'd have to put into a lightweight e-bike to overcome the power difference on a full fat e-bike. Yeah. And it came more and more to light as we rode more throughout the day of where these advantages and disadvantages came through, having the two different platforms side by side.
So moving on to the ride experience of both bikes, I'll start with the Yeti. I just found it to be super compliant. It gripped the ground amazingly well. You could really push it hard into turns. It was really punchy out of corners. So a lot of the time, I mean, it depends on riderability, obviously. I hadn't ridden an e-bike for a little while, so I was probably using a bit too much braking, therefore stopping at apexes and corners. But when that happened, I found that as soon as I was on the pedals again, with the shorter crank arms, I was up to speed so fast, so I could really correct mistakes quite easily. The bike was really enjoyable there. Going downhill, I just felt super smooth, again, super planted. I think with the Yeti being the full fat e-bike, so obviously heavier, deeper travel, you've got the 170mm fork with the 160 rear end. I really felt like I sat into the bike, felt connected to the trail, and could really push on. With that said, as good as it was going downhill, it was equally really good trail riding, just sat down riding through the trees. You do feel the weight of a full fat e-bike in those kind of situations. And also, Cannock's got a lot of pedally descents. They're good descents, fast, but sometimes you do have to pedal quite a lot to keep your speed up. And when you're at that speed, I felt the motor resistance coming in a little bit. So I was pedaling slightly against it, nothing untoward at all. You know, the Shimano motor is very smooth. But yeah, you start to feel that resistance, and that can sometimes, you know, hinder on the faster descents. But the steep stuff, that's not an issue at all. This bike through steep, tight, tech terrain is one of the best bikes I've ever ridden, to be fair. The geometry really suits me on the large bike. I'm slightly shorter in the arm at 5'10", and the large bike just fits me perfectly. I feel like it's a really good balance. So I really gel with the Yeti, and yeah, really enjoyed it a lot. So Toby will give you some information on the Mondraker and what he found riding that.
Okay, like I said before, I've been riding the bike for a little while, but this is the first time I've ever been to a trail centre with it, with a lot more elevation and a lot more sort of technical trail, which I think was necessary to really define what the bike can and can't do. I think for me, because I've been riding full fat e-bikes, crafties and even levels for a long time, I was quite apprehensive on whether I wanted to go back to a lightweight bike, because as much as I really enjoy riding a normal muscle bike, I had adopted a riding style which suits me with a heavier bike. Yeah. I mean, I liked the crafty because it was heavy. I liked the way you had to use it as almost like a half motorcycle. So you would have to plan your turns better. And with the Neat, it's so different with the way it feels, like being almost non-different from a normal muscle bike. Whether I thought that would have a detrimental effect to my riding style at somewhere like Cannock, but just with the way, I mean, I've got it set up and the way I ride the forward geometry bike, I don't think for 1 minute that I would think that I'm at any disadvantage on a Neat as I would have been on a crafty. I perhaps could be faster through the tight stuff. I find the bike being lighter picks up and is a little bit more playful, but still has all of the handling excellence of the bikes before, like the crafty and the level.
So do you think that's to do with the forward geometry, or the fact that it is the lighter weight system, or both? It's
a multiple of lots of different things coming together. I think when you add the 900 grams, you would think because it adds that little bit of extra weight, you would feel it, but you genuinely don't.
No, I found that really.
So for me, the way the TQ system works, the range extender, when you plug it in, it will deplete that battery first, and then it will then switch onto the main battery. So at some point in your ride, you will be carrying that dead weight around with you, and it doesn't have as much detrimental effect as you would think. So,
and you can also run the Neat with the range extender just on its own. So you can take the internal battery out, run the range extender, and that will give you 50% of the overall.
Yeah, so if you're feeling really fit and you just want a little bit of extra on the climbs, you could pedal the bike around Cannock, no problem, with no motor assistance whatsoever. Yeah, if you found that you got late in the day and you wanted just that little bit of a boost coming up the hill, the range extender would be enough to get you a lap easy round Cannock if you were strong enough and fit enough, or you just wanted to push yourself that little bit further. You ran the Yeti in mode 3?
Yeah, mode 3, which is the middle mode, and I didn't touch it. I didn't feel like I needed to. It had enough punch on the climbs. On the way down, it was all the power I needed. But there was a stark contrast between the two bikes, and that's really what we found at the end of the ride and at the beginning. I mean, both bikes ride amazingly well. They roll amazingly well. I mean, I didn't even realise that the Yeti wasn't turned on to start with, going out of the car park there. So they are both great in that respect. But when you do back-to-back them, the way the bikes ride is
and I think
really
when we
different.
started the ride, it was, for me, riding against a full e-bike, I was a little bit conscious of thinking, well, if I overuse my bike, we're going to end up with this big gap between range on the bike. So I found myself having to use the middle and the top mode to stay with Will on the Yeti on the first couple of climbs, which gave me a little bit of anxiety, thinking if we carry on like this, then my bike's going to run out, and we're going to have this big discrepancy of one of the bikes running out of battery as the day progresses. But
didn't happen.
As the day moved on and we got into the ride, and still by using those two modes, bearing in mind we're flipping between on the Neat, it's only 50 Newton meters of power, so it is going to be a little bit more economical anyway. But we found that as the day progressed, the bikes kind of ran down pretty evenly.
Yeah, they did.
Because you can be really efficient on the Neat through the tight techie stuff, and because there's very, very little resistance when you come off the power, you don't really notice when the motor's on or off. So there could have been a higher percentage of the time when I was riding which I wasn't even using any battery at all. So
yeah,
I think that's when the range thing comes back into alignment. It's only in the grinding climbs when you're having to really put some effort in to keep up to a certain speed, then you find that the bike, the full e-bike, can pull away slightly from the lightweight e-bike, but depending on your fitness, I don't think you'd have a problem.
I think you you got it back in the turns and the corners, didn't you? You kind of caught me up on twisty turns because the Neat is so agile. Now, that's not to say the Yeti isn't. When you do get it rolling and you're on that fast descent pushing, it's really responsive and it handles amazingly well. But that agility that you get from the lightweight e-bike, especially with the MONDRAKER with the 4 geometry, you can kind of make up that time. So you're seesawing a lot if you're similar ability to the guys.
And the faster you go on the Neat, it rewards you more anyway. So, I mean, if you want to be brave and you want to push on, then once you learn the grip on the trail and you know where your limits are, the bike will always enhance and flatter your skill set to a point where you're riding very well.
Yeah.
In retrospect to the way the bikes handle, the Neat is a very playful, changes direction really well. You can pedal through the motor without any resistance, and you can find that you're the one setting the pace rather than the motor dictating when it's on and off, and how much extra effort you have to put in the bike when it comes off the power.
When I jumped from the Yeti to the Neat, it did feel like I was generally jumping from a full fat e-bike to a normal muscle bike. I sat quite high up on the Mondraker, so I didn't feel like I engaged with the trail as much, but I think that was as much to do with my riding and the suspension setup that we didn't delve too deeply into on the day. I'm quite confident I could get the Mondraker set up really well for me. But the Yeti with the full fat system definitely gave me that security, and I found the grip slightly easier.
Yeah, and like I say, I mean, they're super high-end products, so they do deliver a super high-end feel to them. So
yeah,
descending on the Yeti and descending on the Neat, for me, I mean, there's no limits to how fast I can go on the Neat, because I'm very well versed on the way that the Mondrakers handle. So when I jumped on the Yeti, being slightly shorter and slightly lower, even with an extra 10 mil of travel, it required quite a different riding style to get the bike to work for me. I think I can go just as fast. I just have to really put the effort in when I'm getting past that limiter on the motor. But once the bike's up to speed, and if you keep pushing and you leave your braking late, or you carry a lot more speed through the corners, the Yeti will keep moving. Whereas you can really charge at stuff with the Neat because it's so light, because it grips so well. I find that the overall kind of catches the Yeti back up. Not everyone wants to go crazy down the hill. These bikes are more than capable than doing pretty much anything you want to do with them. And some of the moments we've had on both the bikes on that day, because it was pretty skatey, and we got away with murder, you know, where the bikes were just phenomenal in the way that they handled the tracks, because multiple other riders would crash on that same section and we were riding through it as if it was nothing. So
they were definitely skills compensators.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's certain things that these bikes can do which is worth every penny of the development
beyond
our
skill sets.
Yeah. And when you're talking about companies putting years and years of development into a product, the reasons why they do that is for the experience that the end user gets. So
to conclude, basically what we found is that the range situation is a lot closer than probably people think. The lighter weight system, although it's lower on battery capacity and motor power, you ride it in such a way that it's so efficient that you can really eke the miles out of it. There was very little in it at the end in what we had left.
I think the Yeti came back at sort of 27, 28%, and the Neat only had 24%, so it was a lot closer than we thought. The divisions on the Shimano system are in blocks, obviously, rather than a percentage, so each block is a 20% capacity. The Neat does have a percentage, so when you put the range extender, you start off with 150% and it will go down 1% at a time, so it's a much more accurate division of what battery you have left.
So with both bikes, it is a case of just deciding what kind of bike you do want to ride in terms of agility or downhill capability. Both will do both equally well with setup. But if you like that more sprightly, poppy, agile bike, then the Neat is clearly the bike to go for. If you like that more security, more aggressive type of bike park riding, I think the Yeti is probably going to be better suited to you.
If you were bike parking the Yeti, you could buy an extra battery for the bike, so you would end up with 1260 watt hours if you wanted, so you would never be short. With battery capacity, unlike a lot of other bikes on the market, both of these platforms enable you to run and carry as much battery as you want. You could buy an extra 360 watt hour power tube from TQ, and it's light enough to put in a backpack, so you could have 700 or 800 watt hours carrying on your person and the bike easily.
If you want to go adventure
If you want to
riding.
do a massive ride, or you could carry these batteries and leave them in the car, and if you're bike parking, you could just swap the batteries out and you could have as many runs as you wanted.
Yeah. We've come to the conclusion, after this first initial ride anyway, is that the range situation doesn't need to be as much of an issue as people think it is. Basically, the choice is between what kind of bike you want to ride. So the lighter, more agile, poppy, trail-orientated bike, or the more gravity, bike park, heavier full-fat system to give you that weight and security. Then obviously, something like the Yeti is going to be the right one for you. But in terms of range, basically, you don't really need to worry too much about it.
If you can ride a push bike in any way, shape or form, the 50 Newton meter motor is more than strong enough to carry pretty much most people up a climb, especially even a steep one. I didn't find that I was any worse off climbing the really steep techie bits on the Neat as I was on the Yeti. So
no, and I mean, if you are a heavier person and you do keep it in full power mode going up those steep sort of climbs like there is at Cannock, the battery will run down quicker. But I think the Neat, with that system and the lightweight setup, it does give you that ability to keep a more trail orientated, good cadence ride, which will make your battery pretty efficient. So we've got both bikes in the shop here at Sussed Out. If you want to come and demo them or take a look, please feel free to come down and give us a shout, and we'll see you guys soon.